Hello. Today's goal is to learn the four properties of math. And the reason we learn mathematical properties are it allows for higher level thinking. Once you start getting used to these mathematical patterns, you'll be able to start to see general rules that are going to apply later on in your math solving, including algebra. So let's take a look at the four that you need to learn. We're going to start with one we've talked about before, the associative property of addition and multiplication. So here I have two examples. Starting with the addition property, we have 3 plus 5 plus 8. Notice the parentheses are around the 3 plus 5. Is going to be the same as 3 plus 5 plus 8. Notice the parentheses are around the 5 plus 8. If I just look at this side, in terms of order of operations, I would solve parentheses first. 3 plus 5 gives me 8. I bring down the plus 8, and I get 16. On this side, for order of operations, 5 plus 8 gives me 13. I bring down the 3 plus, and I also get 16. If you take a look at a multiplication example, my parentheses are around 2 times 5 times 6. Here, I've got 2 times whatever 5 times 6 equals. If I follow the order of operations and solve parentheses first, 2 times 5 is 10, and then I bring down my times 6, and that gives me 60. Over here, 5 times 6 is 30, and I bring down my times 2, and that equals 60. Basically, the rule says that when you are grouping during addition or multiplication, the results are going to be the same. Your sum or your product is going to be the same. It doesn't matter how I group the numbers. To help you remember that, here's a little pictorial representation. By the way, I need to give a shout out to Mrs. Lesh. These were her picture ideas, and so I want to give her credit for that. In this example, we have a group of friends, Juan, Bob, and Susan. You'll see that Juan and Bob are grouped together, but it still remains a group of these three people. Over here, we're grouping Bob and Susan together, but notice we still have the same grouping, Juan, Bob, and Susan. This demonstrates the associative property, that it doesn't matter how you group them, you're going to get the same result. Let's take a look at our next property that you need to know. This one we haven't talked about yet. This one is called the distributive property, otherwise known as the chip and dips property. First, let's take a look at a number example. Here I have 6 with parentheses 4 plus 3. In the past, we have done order of operations. 4 plus 3 is 7, and 7 times 6 is 42. The distributive property says that you should take the number outside of the parentheses and distribute it inside the parentheses. So instead of thinking of it as I want 6 4 plus 3s, you're thinking about it as I want 6 4s and I want 6 3s. So that would look like this. 6 times 4, 6 4s, and 6 times 3, 6 3s. When I solve that, I get 24 plus 18, which equals 42. I call this the chip and dips idea. Actually, Mrs. Lesh came up with that. But I love thinking of that in this way because it deals with food. But also, if you take a look, I have a tortilla chip here, and then I have my parentheses, and I have salsa and nacho cheese. Well, to make a really good chip, I want to take that tortilla chip, and I'm going to dip it in the salsa, and then I'm going to dip it in the nacho cheese. So that's our pictorial representation to remember to distribute that chip to both of these bowls of deliciousness. Here's another example. Notice this time the number in the parentheses is on the outside. So my parentheses are 5 minus 2 times 6. Using order of operations, if we solve 5 minus 2, I get 3. Bring my 6 down, 3 times 6 is 18. Notice with the distributive property, I'm going to get the same result if I distribute the 6 into the parentheses. So 6 5s minus 6 2s. That would be 6 5, 6 times 5, which is 30, minus 6 2s, which is 12. And then of course I'm getting into that habit of adding the opposite. So I'm ready for my algebra. So 30 and a negative 12 would give me 18. The next property that is also one we haven't talked about yet this year is called the identity property of addition and multiplication. Notice I have two examples here. 3 plus 0 equals 3. 3 times 1 equals 3. 3 is keeping its identity. 3 can keep its identity. Any number can keep its identity when you add 0 or multiply by 1. So the identity property simply means that any number that you add 0 to is going to equal that number. Any number that you multiply by 1 is going to equal that number. Here's a little fun pictorial representation, thanks to Mrs. Lesh. A magical identity machine. When you insert a number and add 0 or multiply by 1, you're going to get that same number. The last property that you are responsible for knowing is called the commutative property. We talked about this one and gave the example of commuting back and forth to work. Here's a different way of looking at that. Remember, with the commutative property, the order of the numbers is not important when you add and multiply. The sum or the product will stay the same. Here's a numeric example. 5 plus 2 is the same as 2 plus 5. Both of these equal 7. This works when multiplying. 4 times 3 is the same as 3 times 4. Both of those equal 12. To represent this in a picture, I've got some pepperoni and green pepper pizza. So if I say that I want to order a pizza that's half pepperoni and half green pepper, notice that it doesn't matter what side they put, what half they put the pepperoni or the green pepper on, it's going to be the same pizza. So the order doesn't matter. Hopefully the pictures will help you remember the rules of the properties. We're going to practice these and apply those in class.